In today's episode, I have the pleasure of talking to Chris Poole, the Director of Trading for BetVictor, joining me all the way from Gibraltar. It's great to have you on, Chris. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, Pete. Nice to speak to you.
Yeah, nice to speak to you. First off, before I get started, I wanted to play a little sound effect for you in honour of you being on the pod.
Okay.
Do you want to explain the relevance of why I played a trumpet?
Well, I suppose you're probably playing a trumpet because I do like to pull up trumpeters on Twitter quite often. I don't even know where that started, really. It was more, it moved on from sort of after-timers and trumpet. I don't really know where the trumpet started, but I found it funny someone else did it and I just kept doing it. And yeah, it does make me laugh. So it's meant to be good fun, but some take it better than others.
Yeah, so to explain, it's basically people who are blowing their own trumpet, posting up after timing,
yes,
saying, I knew that horse was going to win, or posting up a bet slip. And it's very much like, all right, okay, well, you could have told us beforehand, right? You're just blowing your own trumpet. So some very funny tweets that you put out.
Oh, right, thank you. Very kind of you. I do try and amuse.
Yeah, definitely do. Can we talk about after timing, Ansel? Is that something we can get into?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you were Tony Ansel.
I was Tony Ansel, yeah. Well, I think I was on Twitter maybe 12, 13 odd years ago, and I followed Tony, and I obviously knew who Tony Ansel was, and he's still betting away or getting people to bet for him and stuff. He did have a little bit of a tendency to after time on his Twitter account. Okay, fair enough. Tony's made a living out of the game and selling tips and this back in Athletics Ricks and stuff like that, but he did like to after time a bit, and it came to a head in 2013 Darts World Championships. I'm very keen on darts and I bet quite a lot on darts, and I was like a lot of people with MVG. And he was, I think he was 4-2, or he missed a dart to go 4-2 up against Taylor. Anyway, he was about evens in the final against Phil Taylor, and I think it was double 16, and he would have gone 4-2 up. I've no doubt he would have won if he'd hit that, but he didn't hit it, and Taylor came back. And anyway, when picked up the trophy, and he's already tweeting like, "Well, experience pays, and even money, Taylor." And I thought, hold on a second, I'm sure he hasn't mentioned anything about that. So I looked back, and he hadn't tipped Taylor, he hadn't mentioned Taylor, he hadn't spoken about Taylor. But as soon as so I had the needle, and just out of luck, I just thought, right, he needs to get pulled up. And there was actually a very funny, I don't know who started it, but on the Betfair forum there was a funny after-timing thread that lasted for years and years on the horse racing forum. So I used to find it funny because I think we all hate after-timers, really. There isn't really any value in after-timing, whether it's in betting or life or anything. Hindsight is a terrible thing coming out of it all the time. So I just started after-time Ansel and just had a little picture of a little clock. I didn't really think much of it. So I started pulling up after-timers, and then people sort of direct messaging me with, have you seen this one? Have you seen this? People I didn't know, and it took off. And over time, there was just like more and more followers. And obviously, at this time, I was getting a bit controversial. I didn't want I think a lot of people knew it was me, especially in Gibraltar, because in the game and that, and found it funny or whatever. But it got a little bit sort of bigger, and people were trying to unmask me and stuff. It was like a bloody Spider-Man thing or something in the end. But I suppose if anything, I probably was a little bit naughty with a few tweets and stuff. And clearly, I didn't like some people more than I liked others, and I probably regret doing that sort of thing. But anyway, it got to about 8.5, I think, nearly 9,000 followers at one point. It was very popular, and I felt quite like great power. Like I felt a bit like superhero-ish with it. I was a bit worried about people knowing it was me and whether it would get me in problems at work, but I kept doing it. And then probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, there was it got a little bit unsavoury. I think there was a few people that hated it more than others, and I'd pulled up too many times, and I got ceremonially unmasked. But it didn't end well, really, because somebody who I'm not going to mention on this pod, but he'd know he is. I doubt he'd listen, to be honest. It got a little bit nasty. It got me work involved and everything. So from what was meant to be a bit of fun, it was a little, believe it or not, it was, I know how people feel with the old pile-on things on Twitter. It ended pretty badly. And actually, when I see pile-ons now, I understand, because I was actually not, believe it or not, it ended really I was in quite a bad place for a couple of days. Didn't sleep. I was worried about losing my job and everything over a bloody Twitter account. I laugh about it now, and I'm quite happy to say it was me, but for a while it got a bit funny. But while I was doing it, I did enjoy it, and most people enjoyed it. And like I say, if anyone's listening who I properly upset, apart from the geezer who unmasked me, because I'm glad I upset him. But anyone else, I apologise if I went too far. But now I just basically do the after times on my own account. So there's no masking. It feels a bit easier doing it under your own name now.
Yeah, well, I certainly enjoy it. I think I've seen people, they send you them on Twitter or X as it is these days, and they say, CC Chris Poole. They send you bet slips or people claiming to have known all along what was going to happen. It's very enjoyable content. I think when, social media can be so poisonous and so polarizing, and then you see stuff like that, it just makes me chuckle every time I see you've posted a new one
It's
up.
probably 80% of people take it quite well, probably, and then some people take it really badly, which I don't know why. I don't know, but I've always found it like the trumpeting thing. I've always found it like amusing. It's almost like when you're in a pub and someone wins the jackpot on the fruit machine. And they look round and they want a round of applause. Do you know what I mean? As well, I'm not going to give you a round of applause. You grew up in betting shops, which we'll move on to, I'm sure, but there was always somebody who wanted to show you their winning slip. They've done their money all day, but when they finally back to winner, they go around the shop show, oh, look, I backed that one, Tony McCoy or whatever. I never really got it, but and people still do, and it's just moved on now. It's just moved on to Twitter. It's generally Bet365 or Sky Bet slips, isn't it? Which is sometimes even funnier, but there you go.
There you go. Yeah, well, it's very funny and it's worth checking out. You mentioned how you're working in the industry then, and on your LinkedIn, it says you describe yourself as a dinosaur because you've worked in the industry, 26 years, making your way up from betting shops to now direct to trade. Just give the listeners a bit of a sense of what you've done along the way, and we'll get stuck into all those points as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, I do feel like a bit of a dinosaur now. I'm 50 now. I left school at 16, and I went straight into working in a bank, which was dreadfully boring but sensible. I went to go out and earn money. I didn't really want to do further education because I was already into punting.
Yeah.
And just wanted to get money. I ended up working in AR Dennis, which was an independent. People will remember it. I'm sure a lot of people remember it. I was a cashier for AR Dennis at 18 when I left the bank and sort of moved through the ranks there, and ended up working after AR Dennis. They sold out to, I think in 96 or 97. And then I left them and worked for another independent in the UK. Everything changed massively when I met my now wife, who was from Dublin, and I ended up, after a couple of years in England, we moved to Dublin, and then everything changed. I worked for Bores for a small bit, then Paddy Powers in their race room for about a year. Well, not their race room, in a phone acceptance centre. And then Victor Chandler, as it was, then they came into Ireland. They were trying to get a footprint in Ireland, more of an online presence, and they did that by opening shops generally, and they did poker and on course, which I learned a lot about there, and I ended up joining them basically as a shop manager of their flagship shop in Baggot Street in Dublin. That was great. We opened up a few more shops. Then there was a recession in sort of 2008, and a few of the shops were struggling a bit anyway, but the Baggot Street shop was doing all right. But when the recession came, we were after high-end punters. That sort of, obviously the bubble burst a little bit. There was big sort of property boom which went, and we lost a lot of decent players. Then I got approached to come and work at the head office in Gibraltar as looking after horse racing, which was a massive departure, obviously, from being in Ireland to move to Gibraltar. And that sort of went all right. And my family moved over after 6 months, and I settled here, and then moved on to sort of running all of the trading there. So there was a lot more to it, but I haven't really been out of the industry. I did a little bit of door-to-door sales at some point. In the middle of all that, I think it was when Lavritz took over Dennis, and I didn't have a job for a while. But generally, I've always been in the betting side of things, and more as a bookmaker or trading or different parts of it. So I've got a lot of experience. Dinosaur, I probably put that more of a job. I probably need to be a bit more sensible on LinkedIn these days, Pete, 'cause I don't know who's looking at it, but I don't think you're supposed to put pictures of dinosaurs. I think on LinkedIn you're supposed to just blag about all the great things you've done and forget about anything that didn't work, aren't you? I think that's the way it works. But yeah, that's about it. So now as director of trading at BetVich, there's about 60 traders underneath me looking after all sports, which is quite exciting. It's different, and it's moved along. I'm sure we'll go into over the years. It's changed quite a lot, but that's what I'm doing now.
I guess, when you said that you left school at 16, was betting always like a passion of yours? You always enjoyed it? Were you the type that in the secondary school you were running a book, or you were going with family to betting courses on the weekend? What was the appeal, or why did you get into betting in the first place?
My nan and granddad were punters, though. They were always punters, and I was very close to them. And I used to go as a kid just round there once a week, see how they were or whatever. They would always be sitting watching racing if it was on the telly, if I went in the morning, they were picking their horses out of the Daily Express or whatever they were reading. And really, I didn't really pay much attention. I think they used to give me 50 pence or a week just as a little bit of pocket money. And then one week I was asking, "Oh, how'd you pick your horses and all this?" And she said, "Oh, look at the jockeys and all that, obviously." So basically, my nan's to blame for my entire life, really, because she said there, "Well, I'll tell you what, do you want to have your 50 pence on a horse this week instead of pocket money?" I mean, I can't even remember how old I was, probably 8 or 9 or something like that, very young. So I said, "Yeah, go on then, we'll have a go." And I did massive after time here. So obviously the first horse I backed won. I didn't know. I said, "What's this jockey like at Leicester Piggott?" She said, "Oh, he's the best." I said, "All right, we do that one then." And then I totally forgot about it. And the next week I went to see him and she gave me like £3. I said, "What's that?" "Well, your horse has won." And I said, Blimey, I thought this game's a piece of piss. Obviously, that was not there. It was a long time since I backed another one. So that sort of got me a little bit interested at a young age. And my brother got into punting. Now, my mum and dad were dead against it. I think it might skip a generation, the old punting bug. But my brother was bang into it and he used to take me to Kempton and Sandown and places that were near enough where we lived, Newbury. And I absolutely loved it. I used to love going racing. I used to, obviously, it's a lot tighter now, and rightly so, but it was very easy to go up to a long course bookmaker even at quite young and get your 50 pence or £1 on. And you've hit the nail on the head, actually. As a school child running a book, I did my absolute cobblers on Wimbledon. Was a big one when they beat Liverpool in the 1988 Cup final. They were 9-2 in 90 minutes. I didn't realise that you could flint people for a price. I was giving them the right price, 9-2. All laying 50p's and pounds or whatever, and I was thinking, well, like everybody thought Wimbledon couldn't beat Liverpool, and they won. I did my money there. Used to run a book on Sports Day and stuff like that, which was quite good fun. And my biggest disaster running a book at school was Frank Bruno was fighting Mike Tyson. I think that was a year after '89. It was probably a year after the cup final disaster. And by this time, I'd got a bit more savvy. I was going down the corals and I was having the money back. So I was laying 3-1 Bruno, and I think it was fours in corals. So it was my first time for trading. Like, this is good, right? I worked it out. I was going to do all right. So I was laying the threes and backing it at fours. And then, unfortunately, the head of house, he was called Mr. Walsh. I'll never forget him. He found out I was taking bets and he said, "You've got to avoid them and give everyone their money back." So I was stuck with a bet on Bruno at Corals, which obviously I couldn't get out of, and did me money there. So actually, it doesn't sound like I was very successful back in that day, was it? I'm sure I had a few good times. I only remember the bad ones. But yeah, I used to go down to the betting shop at nearly 3 times a week at lunchtime and put everybody's football. It sounds terrible. It's put everyone's football coupons on. I used to grab them all, and because I was very tall, I was like the tall kid. I could get away with buying the beers and whatever at a young age. And I was never tumbled for being underage, because I obviously zipped me jacket up over me school jumper and me school badge or whatever. I used to go in and put everybody's football hackers on. I do remember a kid thinking he got the lot and he didn't realise that extra time didn't count. He won, like, obviously thought he'd won like 300 or 400 from his quid, and so I was always into it, and it just sort of went on and on. I really just enjoyed it, really. But I think I was doing my paper round money probably quite regularly. The paper round, worked me nuts off every morning delivering the papers, and that probably went on a Saturday morning, probably on the Saturday morning dogs when I was 15 or 16. So yeah, it was very much a passion. I wasn't particularly successful, or even thinking back, I don't think I was very successful as a kid, but I did love it, and I especially love going racing. I absolutely adore going racing, and felt like a right grown up getting a bet on and thinking that I knew what to do. But obviously the ring was a different time then. So yeah, that sort of got me started, Pete.
Yeah, well, a lot there. It makes me think about my own experience. I did a paper round and my granny would put on bets on the football pools, as it was then for me, with a few quid. So I needed a tall friend like you, Chris, to go and put the bets on for me instead.
Yeah, I do think I wonder how it would have been different if I wasn't talking. I couldn't go in there or whatever. Life would have been a lot different, but there you go.
There you go. Yeah, well, obviously the passion for betting comes through. And let's move forward to what you do now, because you're head of a team of 60 traders. I know you're coming on today and talking from a personal perspective rather than representative of Bet Victor. But what can you tell me about your Bet Victor work as a director of trade? What's an average day look like, or is there such thing as an average day?
Yeah, you're right, Pete. I am speaking. If there's anything said here that is my own opinion and not necessarily that of the company, I better get that disclaimer in near the start of the show. Yeah, an average day, obviously, it changes quite a lot depending on what the sporting calendar is. Saturday is always the showpiece day, isn't it? The biggest day in betting. And I love going in and working on a Saturday when you got the top class racing and the football and everything going on. And I used to love that back in the shop days. That always loved the weekends, especially the Saturday when it's just all go from the start. And a typical day is odd to say, really, because sometimes you think things go pretty smoothly, which is what you want, really, but things can pop up from time to time that you don't expect. You can have horrendous run-up situations and any day of the week, really, and on things you don't expect and issues and problems that you don't expect. And sometimes it's the days that you think it's going to be tricky that are easy, and the days that you think are going to be a piece of cake are difficult. But it's good fun. It's what I like doing, I'll be honest. I get to watch pretty much nearly every, well, not nearly, I better be careful, 2 or 3 horse races a day. I mean, people with a normal job, I wonder how they get away. I suppose you can watch streaming on the phone now, but it used to be ringing up an 0898 number for a commentary for about 60 pence a minute or whatever. But, I feel like it'd be weird doing something where I couldn't watch live sport or racing every day. And if you're not having a bet yourself, I'm getting a squeeze if the firm's in a pickle on a situation, which happens very occasionally. So, yeah, it's every day is different, but it's enjoyable, really.
Yeah, certainly it seems to enjoy that. You keep you on your toes. If you've got a quiet Tuesday or Wednesday and it turns out to be quite different, we'll talk about, there's a betting coup that nearly unfolded and you shared, and we'll talk about that later. But I was just curious about like the trading room and modern day trading room, because I've had guests on in the past and many of them have spoken about when they learned the ropes at betting trading rooms. Everyone was about punting. They were betting on who's going to be able to down their pint the fastest, who's going to be the first one into work, whatever it might be. Everything was a bet. And there was a culture of enjoyment of betting. Whereas these days, it seems to be a little bit different. I could be wrong, but I feel like certain companies, I don't know, we're not talking about betting, but certain companies almost actively discourage people from betting who work in trading rooms. What's the reality and the culture there that you see at the moment?
We sort of went the other way in a funny sort of way, because when I first started on the racing desk, Victor Chandler as it was then, we were punting horses quite lumpy for the company. So there was actually a betting ban in there for traders because they were worried that an errant 10 or 20 quid from a trader at another firm could shop the bets that we were having. So actually we stopped doing that quite a number of years ago. We stopped punting totally, really, unless we were hedging. And at that stage, we let the traders and the whole company sort of bet again. So we sort of gone the other way, if you like. So it is, yeah, I mean, it is all about, they don't all bet. There's a lot of them everyone's got an interest in sport in there. There'll be some punting more than others, but we don't discourage it. I think it's quite healthy as long as they don't get themselves in any problems. And we have to be careful because obviously safer gaming is a big thing. And we certainly don't want any of the trading team to get into financial trouble punting. We all think we're great at it. As a good friend of mine says there, and none of them seem to come in with Maseratis. They tend to cycle in, so they're probably not winning as much as they should be. But yeah, I think it's healthy that they take an interest in the punting side of it.
Yeah.
Just the sort of a knowledge base and trying to work out what people are up to and stuff. So yeah, I'm quite happy for them to punt as long as it doesn't get in the way of their work, and as long as they hopefully don't get into any sort of financial difficulties.
Yeah, of course. And in terms of the betting that you see, you obviously have a real passion for horse racing. Is that still really important to Bet Victor, or in terms of the trading? I imagine football still is the main driver of trading volume. Or there's some surprising, I was going to say, are there any developing markets or other sports or areas where more trading than you would expect?
Yeah, well, football is the biggest, but horse racing, I think it's quite surprising for many people that horse racing has held up as well as it has over the years. I mean, we've got quite a good sort of heritage horse racing brand, if you like, but I still think for most other firms, horse racing's held up better. I think most people was thinking in the last sort of 10, 15 years that horse racing would dwindle a bit more, but as it happens, it sort of hasn't. And obviously, there's other horse races around the globe, and there's the American racing and APRA races and the Sky Sports racing as it is now. And there's probably a lot more content as far as racing, but even the UK and Irish racing, the sort of turnover's held up quite well. Surprising sports, well, quite a surprise was cricket's actually on the increase, or it has been on the increase, which took me a bit by surprise. I think maybe, obviously, there's more and more 2020 franchises around the world, but also I think maybe even England's gung-ho approach to Test cricket and stuff maybe inspired people to start betting it a bit more. But cricket's been quite surprising, really, for me. I didn't see that as as having the growth it's had in the last 2 or 3 years. And one that you'll absolutely hate, which I will say is the growth, is the PlayStation football, Pete.
Okay.
E-battle football. So that sort of came about during COVID, really. We had it before then, but when there was actually no football whatsoever, people were playing on that. It's kept going. It goes throughout the day, and it was 8 minutes. And I see my son playing it, but I'm no good at it. And I certainly would struggle to have a bet on it, but it's quite a growth betting thing, actually.
And so obviously let's focus on horse racing then. And it's been in the news quite a lot lately in terms of affordability checks, especially. What's the situation as you see it at the moment? Is that really impacting your customers and what you're able to do? It's so many moving parts. So what we say today might be outdated in a couple of weeks. But what's your take on how you see it currently?
I suppose I'll be similar to most people in that I think firms recognise that it was a bit of the Wild West maybe 8-10 years ago, and things were done pretty poorly, and there were no checks and things like that. So I'm fairly sure at one time or another, most firms have been guilty of letting people bet more than they should have done, but those days have obviously gone. I think as far as affordability is concerned, I think it's here to stay. The white paper obviously is going to be major, and there's obviously there might be changes to what happens now. But as far as there's a regulator in charge of the sport, and rightly so, in charge of the gambling commission, and they want to make sure that we don't let people bet more than they can afford to bet on racing. And the only real way of doing that is affordability checks. I do read a lot and see a lot, listen to a lot of pods and things like that, where people seem to think that firms use affordability checks to weed out bad players. But I can promise you that happened for many years before affordability checks. And from our company, certainly there's no sort of link between the two. But I know why they're here. It's a regulated industry, obviously, and when big fines get dished out because firms have let a painter and decorator lose 100,000 and he should only have been able to lose 10,000 or whatever. As soon as those fines started, and that was probably 7 years, something like that ago. As soon as fines were dished out on the strength of us not control or not knowing exactly what the player could afford to lose or whatever, at that point you're going to have to ask people what they do for a living and how much they earn if they bet to a certain amount. And the only way of proving that, you can't just ask somebody and they say, oh yeah, I'm fine and I own 100,000. Obviously you need some sort of proof, and that's where it gets a little bit grey, I think, with some of the semantics that are used, that pay slips aren't asked for and things like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, firms are all going to want to make sure they don't get fines, really. Make sure they're doing the right thing that the regulators ask them to do. Make sure they don't get big fines. Any firm that continually gets fines is not going to be looked on very well as a reputable company. They won't want to do business, B2B businesses and things like that. So regardless of what happens with the white paper, I don't see things getting less regulated, if you like, and I won't really comment on whether it is.
Can I ask you, have you been given guidance though? That's part of the issue, isn't it, at the moment? And it's not just horse racing, of course. It's all sports. But have you been given guidance? Because that's part of the uncertainty, is like one punter might get asked at one firm particular threshold, and then it's a completely different threshold because there's no firm guidance that's been passed down. So everyone's sticking their fingers in the air and trying to guess what certain thresholds should be and when you should put these checks in place and ask for information.
Yeah, like I say, I'd like, from my point of view, I'm not a decision maker on when we do those type of things. Obviously, I'm part of a cog in the wheel there, but I think there is a certain amount of a grey area on exactly how much a person should be able to spend or lose or turn over, and everybody does it a little bit different. I take your point totally on that. Firms do it. There is no 100% clarity on exactly how much. So for example, if somebody earns 50 grand, some firms would say that 20% of that they can lose gambling. Some may say 5, some may say 25, some may do it differently. And I take the point, and I take all the points when I see this subject discussed, that it probably would be easier or better to have something black and white amount wise, but everyone is trending towards the safety end of the net, if anything, because like I say, you certainly don't want to be up for a fine, and in a regulated industry you've got to do your best. So yeah, it's a difficult question, Pete, but what I don't see in any industry was, since I've been young, that's been regulated, the handbrake doesn't seem to come off particularly, and maybe rightly or wrongly. But yeah, I do take your point that some black and white absolute guidance to amounts and things, which is probably what is going to come out eventually of any white paper. Everyone knows where they stand, and I also totally take the point that people don't want to send bank statements and pay slips and things. I'm in that boat myself. I haven't sent any other firm, and I've been asked for it pretty much everywhere. Yeah. And I won't send them, so I understand why people won't send them. But if you like, the only way you can really prove positive if what somebody earns and what they can afford, and if you don't do it, you're leaving yourself open.
Of course, that makes sense, and especially as well when people have different ways of declaring income or different ways of generating income, and how that all gets accounted for in such checks. But let's ask about the trading aspect, the horse racing especially. You shared a story where there was a treble, I think in 2021. You were on the front page of the Racing Post, and I think the coup went down. I think it was a very sizable amount. I know you have never said how much it was for, but it certainly seemed to be for a big bet. And how often do you find these type of bets, inside information, if you like, especially in the racing world? And tell us what happened there and how often and how frequent they actually are.
Well, so I think there was sort of like a half for 10 punt this week, but I think a lot of them aren't really proper punts. But you do see quite a lot of people putting two and two together with certain like trainers potentially, and thinking that something might happen. And I think sometimes people don't want to be left behind, and they see something happening or they think something's happening, and they just back it because they've seen it happening. So the snowball effect is now massive, and these sort of created, if you like, multiple gambles. Twitter going mad and saying, "Oh, the bookmakers have created this." Well, bookmakers don't create them, but it doesn't take much. And if somebody was to have, I don't know, if someone was to ask for a 25 quid Yankee on 4 Charles Burns horses, and the account was marked up, he'd been involved in something before, then clearly that's just one bet with one firm would get a snowball effect everywhere, because the trader will see that bet and go, "Blimey, I want to have a part of that," and they'll back it somewhere else. And before you know it, a lot of the shrewd operators know how easy this is. So it goes the other way. All these things are too short, and potentially they might be there to be laid. But the curl was on the front page of the Post. I'll get a trumpet out now, front page of the Racing Post. I never thought, actually, I was on the front page of the Racing Post twice. The first time was a complete rig. I Kempton with my brother. I went sick. This is when I worked for Barclays Bank. I went sick. And we went to Kempton and they opened the Desert Orchid statue, and I was right, the picture on the front of the Post, and it was right me having a sick day, and I'm right, that wasn't a good one. But there was only about 1 or 2 people that punted at Barclays Bank, and I don't think any of them noticed. I think I got away with that. But yeah, so this one was really interesting. This was 2021 when it was the Sunday of the the Dublin Racing Festival, so Leopardstown. So you're expecting it to be busy, but obviously you're expecting it to be busy with the Grade 1 races and Willie Mullins favourites and stuff like that. And about 8 o'clock the night before, quite a lot of bets came in, small stakes, but a few massive prices. There's 3 horses, 40 to 1. The biggest prices we laid were 40 to 1, 11 to 1, and 20 to 1.
Yeah.
Even like for a quid each way Trixie, that's 12 grand. So you can imagine it doesn't take many bets of that small to rack up the liabilities. And it went pretty unnoticed. So I think obviously if there's the same trainer or whatever, there's obviously a few trainers that we'd always have a little bit of a careful look at, and if you started seeing multiples, but there didn't seemingly look like any link between these 3, and it could have been a tip in Twitter. We see a lot of bets for any number of Twitter tippers that put 3 or 4 horses up, so you wouldn't really think much of it, to be perfectly honest. But by Sunday morning, it was quite a hefty liability on these 3, and then WhatsApp started going around quite early. I think I got up and I saw about 3 or 4 messages saying, "Well, we've laid a few," and someone else said, "Have you seen these?" And fucking hell, I started worrying then, because that's not the sort of that you tend to see on a Sunday morning. And when I got in and we had your sort of autopsy on what's gone on, it was pretty grim. And then you started working out that the 3 of them had a lot of back form. They were trained very close to each other, and the first people that backed it obviously were the people that were told, the sort of moody accounts that came in and backed it. And then obviously there was people that saw them shortening and got on, and then on Sunday morning. I think the treble was 10-1 Sunday morning, and we were still laying the treble. This is a treble that are 40, 11, and 20, and now we're 6-4 evens and whatever, and we were still laying it.
People are still taking it.
Yeah, people are still taking it, and you're thinking they're mad. What are the mad people? But even then, you could see logic in the selections, and their bundles up their sleeve. I think the first one, I'm trying to think of the name, it's Far Away or something like that. Anyway,
Fire Away.
Far Away, yeah. So I had to, obviously, in these sort of situations, I have to just come clean to the powers that be or whatever and just say, I don't think these are all going to win, but if they do, it's going to be X amount. And then you get the classic, well, can you do anything? And then you do, yes. Not really, no, because obviously hedging possibilities are an absolute and total impossibility, but sometimes you have to explain these things to people. But anyway, so people are locked in at these prices, and it was clearly a well orchestrated coup. The first one half the track, like literally half the track. I think it won a furlong, and the second one won, and the third one got beat, which saved us a fortune. The reason I actually got on ITV that day as well, because I've been doing for our social channel at work. I've been doing like a little preview, generally, like just saying what we've seen money for. There's nothing particularly exciting, but I said, look, you know what? I think I'm going to have to mention this treble rather than what's going on at Punchestown or whatever. So I mentioned it, and it got picked up, and it went quite viral with people saying, "Oh, look," because I was totally truthful. I said what had actually happened, and how we linked them up. I didn't say anything too controversial, just that it looked like we were in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah,
I was clearly hoping that the first two didn't win, and then ITV got in touch and said, "Do you mind going on with?" It was all a bit of a whirlwind, and I said, "Yeah, I don't mind." I didn't really think, and then I went on ITV and said what had happened, and it was like a Skypey thing or whatever. And then I started getting texts from people I haven't seen or heard of for years. I've just seen you on ITV, and then it sort of hit me that, like, behind me, I've just been on ITV. I didn't even. It was buzzy. It was good fun in a way, but it was scary. But it was Barney Curly-ish, and it was probably better, if you like, because to do this properly, to line those three horses up over that amount of time, and to keep it quiet so nobody touched it until I think it was like 8:05 or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden plenty of bets coming in, and the beauty of it was, because the stakes were so small, that these bets are just going to go through. Obviously you've got limits, but the multiple bets, you're going to get a £1 Trixie or a £2 Trixie or a £3, however small people's limits are. And it was genius, really. Like, I took my hat off. I was actually asked by Richard Hoyles on the question he said was, will you pay? And I was like, oh, of course we'll pay. It didn't even, it was a strange thing, but like, you could have people crying foul. There was no crookedness behind the races or anything. It was just a very, very, very well executed coup, and I've not really seen one like it before or since. When Barney Curly did it a couple of times, the horses or most of the horses were under his name. So there was a good guy, but three horses that were under different names. So yeah, it was exciting. I didn't expect to be on ITV. I didn't expect to be front page of the Post, and obviously it led to the inevitable, how did you let this happen type of stuff. Yeah, big post-mortem. And the fact of the matter is, multiple bets are our bread and butter, and there's no way you're going to knock bets like that back. And if it happens again, good luck to the people that do it. But it was a very well marshalled exercise.
Yeah, if only that third one had won. Well, from their perspective.
No, you're wrong, Pete. I'm glad it didn't.
Oh, no, I'm definitely wearing my punting hat now. Yes, that's how you do it, right? You do the small stakes, and obviously it must be very hard to keep those kind of things under wraps, especially with lots of people betting on them, and it doesn't take much for it to escape. So I was going to ask you as well, because you work at BetVictor. I'm not sure if you were involved in it, but I did know it was August 2018 that BetVictor launched, I think it was called a guaranteed market of some kind. And this was from 11 a.m. on the day. There was a separate market which basically guaranteed that you could bet, I think, to win £500, I think it was, from 11 a.m. Now, it didn't last long from what I can understand, but were you part of the decision process on that? And what was the take up like, and why did it not work?
Yeah, I was totally behind it, actually. It did last for nearly 2 years. Okay. So we did run it for quite a long time. And yeah, I can go into it. So what basically happened, the Horse Racers Betters Forum have been pushing for a minimum bet limit, or at least somebody to try it. And I was quite behind giving it a spin, because I know we can't get a bet on or whatever, and I think 500 isn't a huge amount, and at 11 o'clock in the day, the markets have settled down quite a bit. So I met Matt Bisogno, who was the head of Always a Better Forum at the time, and he came over to Gibraltar, and I think he thought it was going to be polar opposites, and I was quite receptive to it. I spun through a few numbers with him about how many bets are taken in their entirety, which always surprises a lot of people what that figure actually is. But I think from your side, the fact that we do think there's more knockbacks than there is, but obviously there's lots and lots of smaller bets that never get factored. But we went through a lot of things, and we came to some common ground, and we said we'd give it a go. I didn't mind us being the guinea pigs on it. We was that the sort of size where we could. We didn't really do it to get any sort of great publicity or anything, because I still think this is quite a you sort of show giving this to a certain section of people. But anyway, so yeah, it was. So basically, we had two markets. It wasn't the main market. We had a separate market. The prices were very similar, maybe a little bit under on occasions, but we guaranteed that anybody that had been restricted or closed in the past, we said they could open their accounts again. We'd look after that. So there was quite a lot of jiggery pokery to get it all up and running. It took a few months to get the technical side of it right and the procedures to get people open. Yeah, I've got the figures in front of me. I won't run through exactly what they were, but in 18, I think 18, 19 months worth of figures I've got here, and we didn't lose and we didn't win. It was straight across, pretty much. But the problem with it was, and this is how I always think it's going to go, is syndication just killed us eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, at some point, I think actually at the start it was, if there was a slight arb up, obviously we'd take a lot on that. But we got our pricing pretty good. We got the scraping a bit quicker and things like that. And we got into a fair place with the pricing. And literally it was just syndication. And all we were at the end, we were a vehicle for syndicates to get on a lot of money on 12 to 1, 14 to 1, whatever else they wanted to back. Because if we've guaranteed to lose 500 quid and they all back it at the same time, roughly, you can't refuse it because you've guaranteed it. The accounts were being run by the correct people, if you like. So it wasn't somebody controlling the accounts. It was actually the people behind the accounts were using them. But what happens, or what happened there with this particular syndicate, who I won't name, but I know it was, they text the phones of all the people that are getting the bet on, and they all place the bet roughly at the same time. So eventually we could have still run it, probably at straight across. We probably wouldn't have lost anything or won anything, but it was never about winning or losing. But in the end, it became, do we want to leave this here and we're just helping out syndicates, really? And I think the conclusion, Pete, was that at 11 o'clock, most people can get a bet to win a monkey somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they couldn't, if you like, genuine, or people that felt they were restricted or they couldn't get on or whatever. I mean, obviously there was no frills on this market. There was no guaranteed price, best odds or anything like that. So in the end, I spoke to Matt all the way through it, and we were very open with the figures and the bet numbers and the people that were the numbers that were playing it or whatever. And I'm happy we did it. It was nice to be involved and to try something, but it gives me a view into minimum bet is extremely difficult to manage from a syndication point of view. Whatever rules you put in, clever people are going to be able to get around it. So in the end, we were actually giving people like yellow cards and sending out emails saying, we believe you're part of a syndicate. But it was very messy. It was very time consuming. And in the end, it was felt that we want to continue to do this. Like I say, we weren't losing any money on it, but if you take into account how long it took to do all these things and to send emails out to people and then to eventually say, no, we knew what was happening. There's no way in the world that 50 people or 60 people are going to back the same horse in the same 2 minutes. That was the end of it. But like I say, it was educational, and if it was ever brought in that it had to happen, we'd live with it, because obviously, but I think that's what firms would struggle with, is syndication. I think that's what kills it.
That's fascinating, because I was on a podcast with Tom Waterhouse from Australia, and I was asking him about that, and he alluded to that. It's generally, I think it's $1,000 or $2,000 in Australia, and generally it's not enough for the syndicates, and they're the ones who are really trying to use it, and it's not used enough by just regular punters. I was wondering, I thought rather than syndicate, I thought, well, it might be a multi-accounting or bots, but these are genuine people, but there was just a joined up attack at the same time.
at the end of the day, if you're guaranteeing it, they're an organised unit, and let's face it, with communications how they are now, WhatsApps, etc., it's pretty good how they do it. I take my hat off because it's quite a military exercise, but the people that they can find accounts fairly easily, and I don't know whether that's on forums or whatever, or let's be honest, if someone says, do you want to open a betting account and I'll give you 200 quid or whatever, then all you've got to do is place these bets or whatever. But they seem to find the accounts quite well, and there was a lot of them that you could see with the same names or whatever. But yeah, like I say, I was quite pleased we tried it. There was a lot of personal. I invested quite a lot into it personally. I wanted it to work because I've seen it from the other side of the fence, and I obviously, when I can't get on, get frustrated and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
And I think if it wasn't for syndication, we'd still have it running now because it wasn't losing us anything. But like I say, that was what killed it.
Sure. So in terms of what might offer a better solution or a way that, because it seems like you want to do it, and no doubt some of the people that can't get on, you would still welcome some of their custom. How do you see a better solution, especially when it comes to racing, which is so synonymous with betting? If people can't get on, you have like best odds guaranteed or justice refunds and guaranteed prices that obviously are all to factor in. Is there a better solution, do you think, or is it just what we've got right now is probably as good as it gets for the time being?
You mentioned best odds guaranteed. I think I would be far in the majority that I wish nobody had ever started best odds guaranteed.
Must be a nightmare for you as a trading director. You don't know what your liabilities will be.
Well, yeah, that can happen, especially if there's big meetings or whatever, and one doubles in price and wins, which has happened, and especially the way the markets move so close to the off. Now it can happen, yeah. And the big problem I think with best odds is I don't honestly think punters realise how good it is a lot of the time. I think most people would live without it, but the problem is once you've given it to people, taking it away as a company, I would love to take it away tomorrow. But from a competitive point of view, if we took it away, a lot of punters are going to say, right, okay, I'm going to go to another firm. I mean, that's obvious. Yeah, if you've got another option, you're going to take it. If the entire industry took it away, if we all shook hands, but I'm a realist, I don't think that the companies are ever going to. It hasn't happened before, and I don't think it'll happen since. If we all got into a room and decided that we wouldn't pay best odds guaranteed, it would be a lot better for punters and a lot better for us. But I don't see that happening. And it's very interesting. I'm a big fan of Ben Keith and Star Sports. They actually were one of the firms that bet me like I bet myself, to be honest. But they bought in best odds, right? Now, who would have said that Ben is absolutely anti promotions, anti giving away money, anti justice refunds, punter versus bookmaker, and Star Sports are now paying bogs. So that just tells you that they feel that to remain competitive, they have to do what other firms are doing. So it's difficult. Like I say, it's difficult to take away. If you've given somebody a concession for a long time, it's difficult to take it away, and you'd lose a lot of customers that you want to retain by binning it. I was trying to remember for this piece who started it. I've got a feeling it was Powers originally, because when I was in the betting shops in Ireland, I remember the day. It was like, remember where you are. What? Best odds guaranteed? What? On multi? It seemed just bananas. Best odds guaranteed. Because if you think best odds guaranteed on everything, including multiple bets, is, when you think about it, it's almost been pitched by, I don't know, but anyway, eventually everybody has to take it up to remain competitive, and yeah, we remove it from some people, and this, that, and the other, as to all bookmakers, and there are certain limits. And I've noticed that there is more firms that are going towards capping it, maybe 1,000 a day, or obviously there's a certain time of day that it comes in, and some firms are not paying it on multiples and stuff like that. So there is a little bit of an edging towards sensible thinking on it, but whether it could go totally, I think it'd be great if it went tomorrow, I'll be honest, but we are where we are, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it sounds to me like something dreamed up by someone in marketing, and then they come to you in the trading department and say, what do you think? Do you think this will work?
It is probably the most bananas thing. Although I suppose SP, I don't know if you remember SP Plus, I think someone started. I don't know if that was that, but that was just hallucinogenic stuff that you'd be taking to think of that, isn't it? SP Plus, one up, Christ almighty. But yeah, I mean, it is bananas. And you, like you say, you pitch it to somebody now and just, why on earth would you do that? You've taken a bet at a certain price, that's the price. How can you possibly not know what you're going to pay out on a fixed odds bet? But there you go. We are where we are with it, Pete. I think, like I say, I'd love it to go, but I don't think it will.
No, I think it's here to stay, absolutely. Let's move on. I want to ask you about your recently started a weekly Twitter show with Johnny Deneen. Runs on a Saturday morning. For those people who haven't listened to it yet, what kind of things do you cover on there?
It's just sort of like I thought there was a gap I love all the podcasts and the tipping things and stuff. I quite like listening to a lot of them, but unfortunately, by the time they go out, like the prices have obviously completely changed. And I thought there was a slight angle for like a morning, like obviously the opening show on ITV caters to a certain audience, but it's not massively betting focused. And just thought it'd be nice to try something. And literally, I didn't really know much about Spaces. Obviously on Twitter, but I didn't really know much about Spaces. And somebody else did one that I thought, well, that's quite interesting, because obviously, as you're doing now with me, podcasts are quite difficult to set up and whatever. And I thought, well, Spaces is very easy. You just press a button and you're there. So I thought it would be quite a good idea. So we just started doing it. I did it with Tony Calvin for a week, and then he had to then go and do one for Betfair. So just out of the blue, I didn't know Johnny. I'd never met Johnny, although I thought he was fantastic on the stuff that he'd done, especially up the ante and things. And I knew I had a mutual friend of his, and I just rang him and I said, look, he might not want to do this. I said, but I'm in a pickle. I really fancied doing this. I did it for a week with Tony, and it worked really well. Anyway, Johnny was brilliant. He rang me and we had a little chat, and I said, look, I don't expect this to go anywhere. We're not doing it for money. There's no sponsorship. I thought it'd be quite nice for me in a way, because it makes me look at the races and make sure I know what's going on a bit. And I just thought it was a bit, yeah. So basically all we do really is just go through what we fancy, or what Johnny fancies, a far better judge than me. And we go through the races, and he's a great talker. We say a few controversial things, but because there's no sponsorship involved, it's quite good that we can mention if you think something got a bad ride, or if something's a terrible price. And now we're into the jump season. That's Johnny's prefers the jumps really. And
yep.
yeah, it's good crack. I don't know how long it will go on. I don't know where it's going to go. I got offer of sponsorship like the first couple of weeks, but I didn't want to do that because I wasn't really done for that. It was done more for a bit of fun. So anyway, if you follow me or you follow Johnny, it's at 8:30 every Saturday morning, and we're just going to keep going as long as we can. Really, we get to just over 2,000 listeners a week, which isn't bad. And as long as people want to listen to it, we'll keep talking. If the numbers start going, then we'll stop. And it's quite good fun. We get abuse on Twitter on a free show for putting up our opinions if they get beat. But yeah, it's good fun. I enjoyed it, and I think it's quite. I think I'd listen to it if I wasn't doing it. If I was going to play my own trumpet again, I think it's all right.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I say, it's free to listen to and gives people a little bit of insight on the Saturday. I was going to ask you about expansion. You thought that could do it during Cheltenham or some other big racing festivals. Any plans for anything like that, or are you going to be too busy on those days?
Yeah, I will really. I wanted to make sure for a start that it didn't interfere with my job, because I didn't want to get pulled up with what do you think you're doing?
Yeah,
What do you think you're some sort of Twitter star and not doing your job? Well, they've been all right at work, and that's why I do it before I start. And yeah, so I probably wouldn't expand it. But I always think to myself, Pete, I'm getting on a bit now, like the old dinosaur thing that I put in the thing. It's only going to be a matter of time before I get a knock on I haven't got an office, but a knock on my desk and say, we're going to replace you with somebody a little bit younger, and then I won't have anything to do. So if I could do this type of thing, I might get a tiny bit of work if I get the tin. Is probably what I'm thinking. So no, I just enjoy it, mate, and I like the idea of it. And if we might expand it, we might not. We might stop it. I don't know. We've agreed. Me and Johnny have agreed. If people want to listen to it, we'll keep doing it. He said he can't do every week, but so far he has. And the only week we didn't do was because I had internet problems when I was away in Portugal, and I couldn't do it for 1 week. But apart from that, it's worked quite well, and the feedback's been really good actually. A lot of people have said they enjoy it, and people, mates of mine, who would actually give me an absolute drubbing if they thought something was shit. So it's all right. So
it's all right.
It's okay.
Yeah. Are you getting more than Betfair's one?
Actually, they don't seem to have done it for a few weeks, Pete.
Oh, maybe they've gone.
But it was never a competition or anything like that. And it was actually it got a bit nasty because a couple of people were a bit nasty about what sort of splitting up. You know what Twitter can be like, and there was absolutely zero animosity between me and Tony. He works for Betfair, and they asked him to do it, and he went and did it, and it got a bit silly actually. But there was nothing like that. We're still friends, and everything's all right. So yeah, but we did see him off, yeah.
Okay, there you go. Well, we started and talking about Twitter and spats on Twitter, what have you, and what it's like. So that's a good way to round things off. I was going to say, we don't plan to see you on TV with Tim Sherwood in the future. You haven't got a burgeoning broadcasting career that you're planning to move into.
No, I haven't. Do you know what? I feel I missed the boat a little bit. I think I might have been all right at this YouTube lark. I made money. I've got a 7-year-old son. You can imagine if I'm 50 that he wasn't exactly playing, but he's a great lad. But he watches all these YouTubers that make fortunes, and I think this is shite. I could have done a lot better. So I reckon I was born sort of 25 years too late. I'm sure I could have amused people. I can't play games, but he watches people play games all day. It's mental what they do. But it's a different world now, and I sort of embrace Twitter, but other forms of social media I sort of do struggle with a bit. I think at least Twitter keeps it real. You get a lot of nastiness on there, and a little bit. It's a bit black and white, isn't it? You either hate something or you love it, and people feel like they have to have an opinion on something, like whether. And there's some things you just probably are better off not having an opinion on, or not sharing it. But I still think it's a bit real. Whereas some of the other ones, like I got off Facebook because I got sick of people like posting their breakfast and saying I'm having breakfast. Yeah, well, you're having breakfast. So. Yeah, not for me, Facebook. Are you on Facebook, Pete?
Yeah, but I don't really use it too much. I think I only use it when my wife wants me to sell something on Facebook Marketplace. Invariably, I'm like, what am I spending 2 hours selling the latest rug that she decided she doesn't want. But, yeah, I think Twitter's the space. Right. Twitter's the space for the betting community, isn't it? I think if you look at all the social media platforms, that's where we all seem to congregate. And it makes sense. Do you want to fire out your Twitter handle for people to follow and grab your trumpet?
At Chris Poole, and I think it's 2 underscores, or it might be 3 underscores, but I think if you put 2 in, you'll get me. I've got my current picture is the Betfair Forum head in hands man. Do you remember him?
I do. I remember him.
I love that.
How would you describe that? It's like dashes? It's like a cube?
Yeah. So it's genius. It's genius stuff, isn't it? To be fair, there was that sort of where Twitter's gone from the Betfair Forum. I think
it has.
In its early days, some of the stuff on there I used to absolutely piss myself. It was cracking, and but you did get a lot of after time, and then you also got people that used to like post their P&L for the day. Like, well, I don't. Who cares? Do you know what I mean? But it was great fun, and the head in hands man was fantastic. In fact, I wonder. I might have a look and see if that after time in Fred's still up, because that's almost what started Ansel. So anyway, just the last thing I would say, Pete, if I may, is that gambling's been criticised. It gets a bad rap, doesn't it, in media and things like that. I'm a little bit embarrassed sometimes to say what I do for a living when I meet other parents and stuff like that. And I thought Tony Keenan, who's really good, I like him, and he said a really good thing on the show he does. I'm trying to remember what it's not the Anthony, but the one over the fence or whatever it's called. But he said a very thing about, like, he's a teacher, but he was saying, like, it teaches you a lot of things, like gambling, and it does really. And I was thinking about it when he said it, and it really hit home with me, because like nearly all my friends I've made through either being in the game or being punters or whatever, and they're great people. Yeah, they're some of the best people you can rely on in the world. And sometimes you forget that it's actually, I think punting and being on both sides of the fence, it teaches you so much, and you can almost cope with sort of bad situations because you've had a life of bad beats and good beats and tragedies. And I think people forget sometimes, and we all fall out. And, you're saying about Twitter and they're fighting the other, but at the end of the day, I think punters and people that are know about betting. I don't know, maybe it's just my whole life, but I struggle when I meet someone who hasn't got a clue about probability or betting. But I think we should remember that you learn some very good life skills out of punting. It shouldn't be just castigated.
That's really good, Dad. Here. I absolutely agree with that. There's so many life skills that you can gain from betting, whether it's dealing with losses, dealing with bad beats. Generally, that teaches you a lot, doesn't it? So they're really well said there, Chris. And thank you so much for coming on and the candor of speaking in your role at BetVictor, and whether it be the syndicates or whether it be some of the racing coups that you see, or just the betting scene in general. It's been a real pleasure to have you on. And I think the listeners will really enjoy this. So thanks very much for your time, Chris.
No problem, Pete.
Yeah, for those people who want to see, I'll put all the links in the show notes. If people want to find you on Twitter, and if you can't find that after timing, Fred, I'll slide that in as well into the show notes, so people can see the source of where so much on betting Twitter these days originated. So thank you ever so much, Chris, for your time.
Okay, thanks, Pete.